Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'll just keep trying to watch that waiting room and watch that chat and watch my slides. So I hope all of you are doing well on this Wednesday morning. I was going to say this beautiful Wednesday morning, but I really don't know what it's like where you are. I can tell you where I am, it's beautiful because I'm in Florida. But hopefully the weather is good for you as well. I know it was yesterday, at least according to the reports I was seeing. So I hope that you're having a great day. I know this is a particularly hard time of year in the calendar. At least I always thought it was that time when we're getting within a couple of weeks of spring break, 2 or 3 weeks of spring break. It seems like that stretch went on forever. So stick with it. Soon you will get a break, and hopefully you're going to be able to do something over spring break that you love and appreciate. Even if it's not going south, hopefully you're at least going to find some fun things to do where you are. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our session 5 of 6. So there's one session left after this session. I want to let everybody know that I am recording this session. We don't put this recording out just for anybody. It's not like it's out on YouTube or anything. It's just we record it for people who couldn't attend the session or people who did attend the session and want to go back and listen to parts of it again. So I'm just letting you know that it's being recorded. And I made sure this time because there's been some issues with recording on our webinars. And the indication I have right now is it's recording. So hopefully we'll be in good shape here. So again, I think all of you have probably been in one of the sessions. If you haven't, I'm Tammy Jackson. I'm one of the employees of MASSP. And one of my responsibilities is to support aspiring and newer principals. And that is what we are doing here with this 6 and 60. So 6 60-minute sessions that are supporting newer principals. And that doesn't mean brand new, because I know there's some people on here who aren't brand new. And that's completely fine. But it's really geared toward people who are experiencing the job in the first 3 years of the job. So I want to start with my elevator speech about school culture. And today I have 2 elevator speeches. I have one for the way up and I have one on the way down, because I had to make sure that I gave you a little more than just my one floor explanation. So students are our most important stakeholders. Every decision we make should consider the best interest of our students. Too often, decisions are made for the adult's comfort in the system or based on what we perceive as being best for students. The decision making in a system must check the stakeholders' pulse to ensure that they have an accurate reading or understanding of student needs. So meaning we have to we always think of our students when we make decisions, but sometimes we forget to actually check their pulse and make sure that the decisions we're making are best for students, at least in the eyes of the student. So I'm going to give you another elevator speech, because if I don't, some of you are going to shut this off right now and say, this lady's crazy. She thinks it's all about students and not about the adults, and I can't live in that kind of an environment. So I do want to make sure I give you the other half of it. And that is, inherently, adults have experience and knowledge that place them in a position to know what is best for children. There are many decisions that you will make that students are not in agreement with. The concept is that you will listen and understand how your decisions impact them. It is also crucial that you take the time to inform students of the reason behind your decisions. More often than not, once they understand the reasoning, they will be accepting of the decision. They may not still like it, but they appreciate that they understand why the decision was made, and they can usually deal with it. Long gone is our culture where we have children do things just because we said so. And whether we like that or not, whether that's our personal value or belief or not, it is the way that our children are being raised now. They are being raised to question, they are being raised to dig deeper, and not to just accept an answer for face value. And that's the culture that we have to function in, right, as educators. And so today we're going to talk about ways that you can still maintain order in your building, a safe order, while empowering students to help be part of the decisions that are made. So let's just, for the purpose of this webinar, let's just make sure that we understand that what student voice means. So it's really a twofold meaning. It refers to the expression of values opinions, beliefs, and perspectives of individuals and groups of students in a school, and instructional approaches, techniques that are based on student choices, interest, passion, and ambition. So sometimes we think of student voice as only listening to what they like about the environment of our buildings. And while that is extremely important, it's also about empowering them to have choice in their learning. Over the years, when I was in the role of a principal, I hosted several exchange students, maybe 7 of them, I think. And with those exchange students, and I hosted them as a private family, obviously not as the principal, but in that time, I would always ask the exchange students, so what are you finding different about our American school, or about the school that you're going to now versus your school? And I can tell you that for at least the European students, and most of my students were from that region of the world, they always said that students are not held responsible for their education here like they are in my country or my school. And they would be shocked when they found out all the information that parents have about their child's education. Like, they can't believe that every day their parents could go online and look to see if they were tardy for a class, or what their current grade was, or whether every assignment was done. And they said that is not the way that it is for us. For us, we are responsible for our education. The school communicates with us, and we are the ones held responsible. Now, that doesn't mean their parents don't support them and have expectations and all of that stuff. It's just kind of a bird's eye view of what the difference is. And that is, my exchange students at least always felt like students didn't have much choice about what goes on in their education. And I know that often I hear educators say, we want to empower students to be in charge of their education. Students should be responsible. We feel like we do all the work and they don't do much of the work. So when you want that to occur, you have to empower students to make that happen. So hopefully today we'll talk about some ways that we can do that. So in this session, we're going to explore what should students have a say in, what students should be heard, and how we can empower their voice. So those are the 3 things we're going to talk about today in this session. When you leave, you'll have an understanding of the positive impact voice can have on the overall school culture, and you'll have examples of the types of things you can do in your building to empower students. The types of things, not if. Sorry about that typo. Sometimes I need to be better about reading my slides out loud before I launch them, because when you read them out loud, they sound different than when you type them, don't they? So again, what I need from you is just sort of to engage in this conversation with me. If you've got something to say, I always appreciate that. You can do that in the chat. You can unmute yourself and you can do it. But I like you to challenge me and ask questions about what I mean. That's how we all learn, right? Is when we seek a deeper understanding. So I'm not offended at all if you want to chime in on what your experience or belief is around something I'm saying, or if you just simply want to add examples of when you did something and it made a difference. As educators, as administrators, we always appreciate learning from people who have had experiences. And even though you are a newer principal, you have had life experiences without a doubt, and lots of experiences with students. So anytime that you can pipe in on something that has worked for you or hasn't worked for you, the whole group will really appreciate that. So I have a little video I'm going to show you here.
I think if we really listen to student voices, we'd be shocked by what we heard.
What's the goal of our school system? To educate students, right? Yet students have the least input on how they get educated. It's the adults who get to decide.
One of the best things I had when I led Chicago Public Schools was a Student Advisory Council. That group helped me think through so many things. When things are going well, young people know it way before adults do. When things aren't going well, young people know it way before we as adults do. Why? Because they're living it.
This may be a no-brainer for those who work with students frequently, but many still think that students aren't serious enough to have input. Well, meet Nidalis Burgos. She's 18 years old, and she just graduated from Lincoln Park High School in Chicago.
We are the ones as students that sit in a classroom. We're the ones who listen to our teachers.
I think if we really listen to student voices, we'd be shocked by what we heard.
What's the goal of our school system? To educate students, right? Yet students have the least input on how they get educated. It's the adults who get to decide.
One of the best things I had when I led at Chicago Public Schools was a Student Advisory Council. That group helped me think through so many things. When things are going well, young people know it way before adults do. When things aren't going well, young people know it way before we as adults do. Why? Because they're living it.
This may be a no-brainer for those who work with students frequently, but many still think that students aren't serious enough to have input. Well, meet Nidalis Burgos. She's 18 years old, and she just graduated from Lincoln Park High School in Chicago.
We are the ones as students that sit in a classroom. We're the ones who listen to our teachers, who understand our teachers, who have to take tests at the end of the day. Students have realized the attack on education is hitting very close to home. It's important to stand up because it affects everyone.
Students do understand what's wrong with education, but student voice is more than just information for adults. It's a way to engage students in their education on their own terms.
Particularly with kids who are struggling, the key to their success is their engagement. The thing we always hear from kids that kind of leave school is like, they don't care about me. Nobody knows me there. Nobody cares if I'm at school or not.
Some school leaders are listening to their students. Take Principal Sharif El-Mekki, for example. He used student input to help turn around a school that had struggled with violence.
Our school was the second most violent school in the state of Pennsylvania. There were school police officers, 3 of them for 250 7th and 8th grade students. Students were suspended and expelled. The violence was tremendous, and their experiences really helped shape what we're trying to do in the community. What makes them feel safe, what makes them enjoy coming to school, what would get them to school on days that they really didn't feel like coming.
Student voice has the potential to drive change in our education system. So what could that change look like?
Having students be part of a selection process, whether it's around teachers, whether it's around principals, whether parents and community members. Again, schools they serve the community.
Right now, I do think I see a lot of hope in students walking out, students starting to organize, students starting to figure out they have power. It's happening. It's happening in Baltimore, it's happening in Los Angeles, it's happening in different cities.
Whether your thing is going out on the street and rallying, or your thing is writing a letter to the mayor, whatever it is, it's important because it shows that we're reaching out to save our own education.
So let's stop believing the myths about student voice. The question is not whether it is important or valuable. The real question is, how are we going to use it?
There comes a time when students need to understand that it is our responsibility. We can't leave this to other people because if we do, the job won't be done right. And that's why student power is important.
Sorry about that little repeat at the beginning. One of the things I'm learning is that when you're running things off one screen, if you click on something and it clicks on the video repeats itself. So I'm sorry that I did that. I was trying to admit somebody not to repeat the video. So when we think about who should be heard then, what students should be heard? Well, obviously the answer is representation of all student groups. All students should be heard. Every kind of student should be heard. Because if we don't listen to all students, we are not getting the perspective of all students. And so obviously we can't always have one-on-one meetings with all students, but at the very least we should have representation of student groups whenever we are listening to students about something that deals with our school. We should have several different diversities within our groups. Meaning because diverse cultures represent life experience, values, and beliefs of different populations, and those populations should be represented. Things affect people different based on the way they were raised, based on their values, based on their beliefs, and if we don't consider all of that, we are not really listening to all students. So we have to really look at our demographic in our school, and we have to say, what is the demographic of our school? What are the populations? What are the groups? And how can we make sure all of them are represented, all their voices being heard? We have to make sure we include socioeconomic groups. Often school initiatives that we do impact students differently based on their level of financial resources. Distance learning has been a perfect example of that. The gap in learning and equity has really been widened by the fact that not everybody has the same support system to deal with distance learning. They don't have the equipment they need. They don't have the internet they need. They don't have parent support. They're home taking care of their younger brothers and sisters. How are they supposed to be online learning? So we have to make sure that we consider all of that when we are making decisions. If you've done any learning about poverty, you know that students who live in poverty approach things differently than students do who have unlimited resources. And when I say unlimited, I don't mean just those kids who really have unlimited resources, but I mean those kids who have basically what they need to get by. And when you live in poverty, you don't always have that. And because of that, those students look at things differently than students who have resources. So we've got to consider that population of people. We have to consider different interest groups. We have to consider those students who are athletes and students who are not athletes. We have to consider those students who are gamers or live in a virtual world for part of their social time. We have to consider students who are not involved in anything. They come to school and they leave school and they do nothing else. We have to consider those students. We have to consider our artists, our musicians. And we definitely have to consider students who like school and kids who do not like school. We have to think about that when we are looking for representation of our student body. If all we did was focus on our natural leaders, the ones who are currently leading on their own, all we are going to get are those kids who are really good academically, probably athletes, have lots of support at home, and that's not the total demographic that we work with. And so we have to make sure that we consider all student groups when we formulate a group to listen to, and all grade levels. I always bought into the concept in my 9 through 12 building that my seniors always really had a lot to say about what happens in the building. I like to make them the leaders. I like to empower them and make them understand that their senior year could go however they wanted it to go based on their actions and behaviors. And I still believe that. But that doesn't mean I don't have to consider the freshmen and what the day is like for a freshman when I make decisions, because they are in the building. So while I might try and weight heavier toward the opinions and the beliefs of the seniors because they have more experience, because they're older, I also am considering all students. And I saw a major shift in that with when my last year of being a principal, the 7th and 8th grade joined my building. So I really had to rethink decisions that I was making because some of the decisions I made affected everybody in the building. Now, there were things I could have, rules and regulations, processes and procedures from 7th and 8th that were different from 9 through 12 to a degree. But there were decisions I made, such as how long are class periods? That bell rang for everybody in that entire school. So what was best for all those grade levels? So I had to consider those things. And so I encourage you to do the same thing if you have a multi-aged building, especially if your building is not completely separated by groups that don't affect each other. So then what should they have a say in? Well, they definitely should have a say in academics, but they should also have a say in their school environment, physical and otherwise. So let's talk about what I mean by that in academics. So how about if they had a say in our instructional practices? How about if we actually asked them, what engages you in learning in my classroom? We just bend over backwards to try and come up with ways to engage our students, but we're not asking them what engages them. We're assuming we know what engages them, and we're trying to build things around that. I know lots of schools who go through professional development as a whole school group on engaging students in instruction. But how many times has that group sat in front of a panel of students who told them how they get engaged, what makes them feel engaged? How about the grading process? No, I don't necessarily mean the grading process as in, how GPAs are determined and stuff, but how about the grading process in how homework is graded? If when they redo an assignment, if they get the new grade or they keep the old grade? How about just that whole way we use grades? I wonder what they think of it. I know what the research shows. The research shows that the only thing that affects students' learning is feedback, not grades. The minute you give a student a grade, they completely shut off any feedback you give them. If you tell them they have an A, they don't really care what you have to say about their A because they got an A. They don't want to hear how they can get better. They got the A, right? And if you tell a student they failed it, they don't want to hear about how they can make it better. You just shut them down. You told them they can't do it, they didn't do it, and you shut them down. So feedback is a huge issue. And I think students will tell you that if they understood what we were talking about with that, they would say, tell me what I can do better and what I did good. Don't just tell me what my grade is. That grade represents way too much. And then how about the pace? How about the pace of what's going on? One of the things, I don't know if I mentioned this in the past, I probably have, but one of the things I did late this past summer, so it would have been after 4 months of the pandemic, when we were all forced into distance learning and things were just really up in the air, I pulled a group of students from around the state. I think I had 25 students or so from all different grade levels, all different types of schools. And I pulled those students together over Zoom and we talked about what had occurred and how it affected them and what they felt about it. And one of the things that they thought was the biggest advantage of distance learning, and they named plenty of disadvantages, but one of the advantages were that you could work more at your own pace. When you go to a classroom, you spend the same 60 minutes or 50 minutes or 90 minutes, whatever it is, with everybody in that class, whether you already know what's being taught or whether you don't, the same amount of time. And they said, I love that there are some things that I already know, that I understand easily, and I can just, boom, go through it really quick. I hate when I'm in a class and I have to sit the entire period when I don't need that time. And then kids who struggle, I'm happy that I have more time than I need to complete something, or as much time as I need, more time than's typically allocated, because I need more time on certain things. And I like that I can take a break and go back to it. So that's what I mean by pace, how fast we go through things. In a particular day, did we learn everything we needed to learn? Do we move on tomorrow or do we go back? Let's talk to students about that every day. How about a say in the master schedule? How about instructional blocks? Students have opinions about how long classes are. And it's opinions based on their experience, not just their bias, but it's based on, this is too short, this is too long, this is ideal, this is what I need. How about the elective offerings? How often do we sit down with students and say, let's just take a look at our electives right now, right? Should we add more things? Is there something we should take away? How have your interests changed and what might we be able to offer differently for you? Whenever you make a major scheduling change, absolutely involve your students in that. If you're going to go from a traditional schedule to a block schedule, or a block schedule to a traditional schedule, or whatever schedule you're going to change up, you should be getting opinions about students. They live in that schedule. They can tell you what it will feel like to be them. They can tell you what the day will feel like to them. I know some principals who have actually spent time spending a day in the shoes of a student and actually went through an entire day of a senior schedule, and then a freshman schedule, then a sophomore, to just feel like what it feels like to be in that schedule. And they came back with some really good insight into what they could change that would make that day more comfortable. So asking students how the schedule is impacting them. Homework policies, and I think that I already had mentioned that, but students have real opinions about that. Students who leave school and go to work every night, or students who leave school and go home and take care of the family, or students who have so much chaos in the home that they can't even think about school once they get home, they have some opinions about what homework should look like and what the policy should be. I'm not saying that you'll change your policy, but I'm saying you should at least listen to what students are saying about it. How about an academic recognition? You are probably holding the same celebrations that you held for years and years and years. I know I was. I know at the end of my 32 years as working in one school district, the National Honor Society induction looked the exact same as it did when I walked in the door. I'm not sure if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but it's just reality, right? Even though our students have changed, our culture has changed, what we value has changed, we still just keep doing the same old thing because it's what we've always done. And this is a big one to me. They should have a say in your rewards programs, your positive program, behavior programs, whatever they are. Whether you're using a canned program or some kind of a hybrid or something you authentically made, for crying out loud, they should tell us how they feel rewarded. We plan all this stuff. Every school that at least I'm aware of that I have worked with, they have a group of teachers who design what that program looks like, right? And they don't even ask kids, if you achieved this, how would you want to be celebrated? What would a reward be? We assume going to a movie is what they want. That's what we've been doing for 10 years. We're going to continue to do it. If you get all A's, you get to go to a movie, right? More importantly, how about if you talk to those kids who don't earn the rewards and ask them, how do they feel about your positive behavior program? How do they feel about the fact that what you are asking them to attain, they don't believe is within the realm of what they can do? Wouldn't it be great if all of our PBIS programs, wouldn't it be great if every kid had an individual plan on what they had to achieve to be recognized? You know what? Maybe with some students, maybe if you have not put your hands on a teacher the entire semester, you get recognized, right? Because that's their reality. And maybe that's drastic. Maybe I mean, if you've only been sent to the office once, maybe that's a really huge improvement for one student. And I will tell you, when it comes to this, listening to students about this, one of the things a student group told me about my rewards program in the school I was in, they said, if you are a really good student academically and you don't have behavior problems and really never have had behavior problems, you lose out in this rewards program because no one's looking for you and pinpointing you because you're already good, right? So we would actually plan if you achieve all these things, you get to do this. Well, part of the achievement may be you get recognized or get coupons or points, whatever your district does for good behavior. Well, those kids who have good behavior say, we never get those coupons because we always have good behavior. So when it comes time for the reward, we haven't even earned it. That was an amazing eye-opener for me when I was told that. And then I went back and looked at the data of students who didn't get recognized, and they were right. They were absolutely right. So there's, an example of something else we should get input from students on. And then just our procedures. Oh, I cannot tell you how many times in the time that I was a principal, we changed when we do announcements, right? Every year there was a discussion about how are we gonna do announcements. One year we would read them. One day we would publish them. One time we would post them. One time we would do it in the morning. Then we do it at lunch. Then we do it at the end of the day. It was all over the place. But you know what? I don't know that I ever asked students, when would you appreciate hearing the announcements? When will you listen the best? What timing works for you? How about the Pledge of Allegiance? Not too many years ago, it became law that we must do the Pledge of Allegiance every day. I know we developed a process, and I never asked students how they felt about that. Not should we do it? That's not an option. How should we do it? When should it occur? What feels comfortable? What feels best? Well, I wish I would have asked them that. Here's one that I did, the design of the cafeteria. So I was, a few years before I was done, I was given a large grant to really just reform my cafeteria. And it was the most amazing thing I ever did. And involved students in that. I didn't want to assume that I knew what kind of seats they wanted to sit in. I didn't, I had them help me decide how many lines should we have? Should there be a line for just a la carte? Should there be a line for, they're the ones eating in there. I never ate in there. I always got my lunch in between lunches or after lunches. I never went through their line. So, a great time to get input. And about after school policies. I know a thing that principals often struggle with is, what time should you close the building at the end of the day? Like this, unless you're there for a reason. I mean, I think we all have a time where we say, after this time, you can only be here if you're attending an event or, something. You can't just hang out in the school building. But you need to ask students, what does that look like for you? How about the student who says, I can't get picked up till 3:30 and I have to get picked up because I go and babysit for my aunt every night? Students are waiting out in the cold for 20 minutes because you closed your building and they couldn't be picked up by then. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we line up for things. Let's talk about procedures. Not procedures, but practices, pretty much the same thing. How should we dismiss students from class? And it should be the same in every class. You sit in your desk till the bell rings, or 1 minute before, whatever it is. But ask students, what would you appreciate when it comes to closing one class and getting ready for the next? How about bathroom passes? Oh, the only thing that I had more policies on than attendance was bathroom passes. Like, how do you get your bathroom pass? And that's one of the things my exchange student, one in particular, told me. I think it is absolutely unbelievable and ludicrous that I have to ask to go to the bathroom. I think it is demeaning, it is embarrassing that I have to ask. And that sometimes I might be told no. Really? I can't go to the bathroom? I understand the other side of that too. But usually when you take a problem to students, they will help you solve it. They will tell you how they feel safe getting a bathroom pass. And if you say to them, I just can't have a free-for-all, I have to account for all of you for safety reasons, they'll help you decide what the best way to do that is. And then again, our behavior programs, like I already over-addressed, having them involved in those things. How about traditions? Homecoming festivities, the pep rally, king and queen. I can tell you what my student group told me. They told me that the only person happy on the day the queen is chosen is the queen, just so you know. The queen is the only one happy. Nobody else is happy. Some behave better about it than others, but they're not happy, right? So why do we have king and queen? Because we've always had king and queen. That's why we have king and queen, right? Pep rally. You know who wants to go to a pep rally? The athletes, and that's it. And if that's the only time you bring your students together is to celebrate athletes, that's wrong. That's wrong. Our students designed an actual thing where every time we had a pep rally, there would be a recognition and a celebration of teachers, and a recognition and celebration of however many, I think it was 3 students that were not athletes, and then we would do the athletic portion of it. So we would have a video showing in the gym, and we would show the person who rides horses with 4-H and competes with 4-H. And somebody would give a narrative about what the student does, and you'd see pictures of it. You'd have a kid either get up there live or record it and play his guitar. The kid who does nothing else in school but is an unbelievable musician. Let's recognize him too. Then everybody will want to go to your pep rallies. Pep rallies will be something people look forward to instead of dread. How about talking to them about what you do the first day of school? How do they want to come back to school? What makes them feel welcome and safe? How about the last day of school? How do you want to wind down the school year? And then, of course, about graduation. We do graduation with traditions, right? And usually as the building administrator, you don't want to be the one to change the traditions, right? You want to just keep going the way it was because you don't want to rock the boat. Because if you do change it, someone's not going to be happy about that. But have you ever thought about the fact that maybe most people aren't happy about the way you're doing it now? Listen to your students. What would make you feel celebrated? What part, if they say we can't stand sitting there while the superintendent gives a speech, Why do you have to have the superintendent give a speech then? Or can the superintendent just be given 2 minutes instead of 15? You know, what is it that they appreciate, and what is it that, who do they want to give them the diploma? Do they want the principal? Or do they want, you know, somebody else in addition to the principal? Do they even care who the school board is? And why is the school board handing me my diploma? I don't know them. You know, just something you might talk to students about. And then how about the physical space that they live in? This first one, number one, is just a huge issue for me. I know of a school that was local to where I was that they were purchasing from a bond all new desks for students. And can you believe that they got to the final stages of choosing those desks and never once asked students what kind of desk they were comfortable in? Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars were going to be spent to buy desks that were going to be in existence for probably the next 20 years. And nobody said to students, what makes you feel comfortable? You know what they did? They went from teacher to teacher and said, how do you like your room set up and what kind of desk do you want? And they didn't ask the students. Fortunately, a wise superintendent got word of that and said, oh no, 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 no. We are not purchasing a desk until we know it's a desk that students are comfortable sitting in. And that's just an example, but that's what occurs in schools every day. How about the learning design or the design of the room? You know, I know this teacher has desks facing this way and this teacher sits here and their board is here and they like their, but what makes a student feel comfortable? If you've got to sit there every day for an hour and you don't get to get up and move like the teacher does, how do they want to sit? How close do they want to be to people? Or do they want it changed up? And how about, why can't they pick their own seats? At least until they violate some kind of a rule. I've done this twice during the time when I was doing facilitation in person with teachers. So I was in a gym one day with a group of teachers, a whole district. It was probably almost 100 teachers. And I had asked, I had said to set the tables up in groups of 6 because it was purposeful for the engagements that we were going to do, groups of 6, and all the material was on the table and all that stuff. So I had the custodians set it all up and I was there early to make sure everything was all set up. And then the teachers came filtering in. And what did they do? They pulled a chair and added 7 to this table because they wanted to sit with their friends. And then this table only ended up with 3 because 3 of their seats were taken and put somewhere else. And nobody sat in the table at the front. And, you know, all those things that always occur. And you know what? I let it happen. I just let it happen. And then I started that session by recognizing what had just occurred. And I said, do you allow students to pick the seats in your classroom? Do you allow them to sit where they're comfortable? Do you allow them to work with who they're comfortable working with? Or do you tell them where they have to sit? And I threw it right back on them. And I said, I'm okay with what you just did. We'll adapt. If this is what makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel like you'll learn better. But do you have that same courtesy for your students? Again, we talked about the cafeteria already. But how about what's hung up on the walls? Right? What pictures are up? What sayings are up? What color are the walls? And then when we're going to have a design change, if we're going to add a wing, or we're going to add some classrooms, or we're going to add an auditorium, why shouldn't we ask students what they want? It's their building. They're the stakeholders. They don't get the only voice, but they should at least have a voice. They should at least have a voice. Of course, we have non-negotiables. We have to have non-negotiables. The law is one non-negotiable. Board policy is another non-negotiable. Things that would be inequitable or discriminate are non-negotiables. But you see, when you talk to students, you just tell them those things. You tell them those things. I sat in on a committee for MDE last year, and it was a committee that was, well, actually, to be honest with you, it was the committee who changed, who recommended and it's been accepted to change the certification of teachers in the state of Michigan. And if you're familiar with that, they've changed. There's no longer just a middle school endorsement, and they changed that whole structure. And that was this committee. And you had some pretty important work to do. But the very first thing we did when we got there that very first day is we talked about the non-negotiables. There was no reason for us to spend one single minute coming up with ideas and concepts that were not going to be considered. I appreciated knowing that. And that's what you have to do with students when you meet and talk and consult with students. You have to tell them what the non-negotiables are. Here's what we can't do. Okay? When we're talking about the cafeteria, here's how it works with the food reimbursement in a cafeteria. We have to follow these guidelines. Okay? So we can't change the ranch dressing to full fat ranch dressing because the guidelines won't let us. And I think I told this group my ranch dressing story. And but you just had to tell them that, and they appreciated it. I remember quickly a story about that. I talked about this earlier about how should we dismiss students. For some reason, that was a big issue in my building, and I assume it probably was in most buildings. To me, it drove me nuts when I would walk down the hall, and with 5 minutes left, 2 minutes left, 6 minutes left, every classroom had a group of students standing at the door waiting for the bell to ring. And then, of course, the door opened and they started creeping out. And 1 minute before the bell rang, 5 of them were in the hallway. And, it just would get out of control. And I would have to rein my teachers back in and say, now, remember, we agreed that students were going to sit in their seats until the bell rang. And we were just going to do that in every classroom and make it easier. So I'd have to rein them in. And one day, one teacher said, "Oh, you have no idea how much I hate enforcing this rule. I hate it. My students, it just gets away from me and they test me on it and they test me on it. And I just hate it. I hate that part of my day, the end of class, every single hour." And another teacher piped up and said, "You know what? You know how I fixed it? And I never have a problem now." Someone said, "What did you do?" And they said, "I told my students that it was Mrs. Jackson's rule that students couldn't be out of their at the door until the bell rang. And if she walked down the hall and saw that you were, I was in trouble. I would get written up because I was not doing the job I was expected to do." And when the students found out that teacher got in trouble for their behavior, they went, "Whoa, all right, well, we can stop doing that. We don't want you to get in trouble. That's not your fault that we get up out of our desks." And it she said, just changed everything. And that happens with students all the time. When they just understand what will occur, why it is the way it is, they may not like it, but they are more apt to accept it. So I'm going to take a quick look here at the chat. Don't see anything in there, but again, feel free to add anything that you want to add. I know I'm talking fast and talking at you, and we do that all the time, but I'm going to keep going until I hear from one of you. So how do we empower students? How do we empower them? Well, the first thing we have to do is establish the importance, that we think it's important to do it. So we have to explore that with our staff. We have to learn about that. Then we consult, we collaborate, we gather and share data, and we inform. This is how you empower students, just like you do adults. So go ahead and read this if you will. So I just happened to find this in one of the books that I was using as a reference for these slides, and I thought it just said a lot of things in one sentence, so I decided just to plop it in there. At the end of these slides, the last slide shows you some books that I used for this presentation and books that I have read and I use in my own practice, so that you might want to. And those books would be, any one of them would be a great book study with your staff to talk about establishing the importance of student voice. If you think your staff is going to be resistant to this, if you're way over here on the extreme of your students have no say, you want to get them to the point where students do have say, you're going to want to really establish that through some kind of study of some kind. And so a book study might be one way that you would do it. I also will send you tomorrow a list of articles that I referenced and referred to and have found that deal with this that you might want to use too. You might want to take those, and I don't know if there's 6 or 7 or 8, I don't remember how many are on that list. You might want to break your staff into 7 groups, have each group read the same article, talk about the article, share out, and so that your staff gets to learn about all 8 articles, that whole jigsaw activity. But just, you have to establish that, because if people don't think it's important, then everything else you're going to do is just for nothing, because they're not going to buy into it. So how do you do it? Well, you provide leadership opportunities. So here's how you empower students. You provide leadership opportunities. Form your principal's council, not council. You have student council, right? Those are the popular kids who are voted on by the students who think they're popular, and it's a popularity contest. And they are leaders. Don't get me wrong. They're beautiful people. They're great people. But they're not the kind of people that all students are going to follow, and they don't give the school a perspective from all students. If you form your own council, you can pick from that diversity that we talked about. And it's okay that you pick them. If you ask teachers to give you the names, they're going to give you the leaders, because people believe that the leaders have to be on the leadership committees. I'm talking about empowering and growing leaders. You pick the leaders. You send out a letter and said, I have chosen you to sit on the principal's council for this year. Include them in school improvement. Maybe have a student who's a liaison to the Board of Education, who reports back to the Board of Education from that group. All kinds of ways. But you should make as many students leaders as you can. You should put as many students in leadership roles as you possibly can. Some schools form a different council whenever there's a new initiative. So if we're going to talk about changing the schedule, we're not just going to deal with the principal's council. We're going to form a group of students who are going to that are diverse, but they're there just for this purpose. Our students who are here for this purpose. I always had a council, and so I didn't always. When I started it, I would have 2 students from each class. That would be 8 students, and I made sure that those 8 students represented all cultures in all student groups. And I would use them for an entire year. But you don't have to do it that way. If you want to empower more people, use them for certain things. Curriculum choices. People say, how can you give kids voice in your curriculum? Well, how about if you look for every opportunity that allows them to pick the book they use? This is mostly for ELA, but how about couldn't you teach what you need to teach with the book they wanted to read and that they felt that they identified with? How about meaningful use of technology? How about if you say you can choose how you're going to do this on technology, and let them pick what's meaningful to them, what works for them. Encourage students to learn through their passion. Whatever they're most passionate about, how can what you're teaching be applied to their passion? Integration of real issues. If we're going to teach, a concept, what's going on right now in the world that would help teach that concept? How about if you let them self-assess and tell you how they were learning and where they thought they were? Or if you personalize learning, like you can do better when you're using technology. How about if you become more of a facilitator of learning instead of the teacher? How about if you say, today we are going to learn how to add 2 numbers. Now, you go out and find out how to do it, and let them find the source that helps them learn it the best. Some students will read it. Some students will look for a video. You don't have to be the only, teachers are not the keeper of all information. They don't have to be. The goal is that students can add 2 plus 2 correctly. How they learn to add 2 plus 2 is up in the air. Let them tell you how they want to learn it. And then support failure. We don't support failure. We learn from failure. We know that as adults, but we don't support it, because if you fail, you get an E. How's that supporting failure? That's not supporting failure. That's punishing failure. And if we believe that we learn by our failures and our mistakes, why are students not the same? And then listen. Really, really listen to our students. Have forums. Whether maybe it's not a council, maybe it's just a forum. Maybe you have a freshman forum. Anybody who wants to stay after school for a half hour, we're going to talk about this. How about feedback? Teachers don't want kids to evaluate their instruction. And I understand that. Sometimes they're immature and they don't really do it fairly. Sometimes they do it super fairly, very fairly. Most often they do it fairly. So how about if you get feedback? I'm not saying you want them to hurt the feelings of teachers. So how about if you said to a group of students, tell me the characteristics of your favorite teacher. I don't want to know their name. I want you to tell me why are they your favorite teacher. And then do the same about a teacher that you don't care as much for or you don't learn as well from. How do they do things? Wouldn't that tell you a lot about what they prefer and their preferences are? I know in a lot of buildings, staff members want to believe that the best teacher is the one who doesn't hold kids accountable. You ever hear that? Well, yeah, they get along with so-and-so, they don't make them do anything. That's not true. That is not true. Why do kids like that teacher? And how can other teachers be more like that teacher? That's what you should be finding out. And learn about your students. I mean, that's education 101, right? Learn about them, learn about their likes and dislikes, talk to them about things that happen after outside of school. Maybe develop school-wide expectations together with students and that they're used everywhere. So students know what to expect everywhere in the building. Not you can do this here, this there, you know. And I understand that there's processes and procedures that have to be different in each class based on the class. I don't mean that way, but I mean things like mutual respect. That should be displayed everywhere in everybody's class. Student-led conferences. How about if we listen to students tell their parents how things are going in the class, not just the teacher? And then how about it just creating that whole sense of community, that we're in this together. This is all of our school. We're here together, and what happens here, we all have to be part of. I think that a lot of us have learned the lesson about how important our community is to us in a time when we've lost our community, when we no longer have a team that we can work with because we can't be together. Boy, all of us have said, man, I didn't realize how important it was to listen to other people. And then again, that last thing, just keep them informed. Inform your students of what the law is. Explain to them what it means to have a chain of command. Explain to them what happens when you change a tradition. Like, let's really think about whether we could actually change this. What's affected by this? Just talk to students. We are so fortunate at the high school, secondary level, middle and high school. We are so fortunate that our kids are at a maturity level that we can have conversations with them. We can reason with them, talk to them, explain things to them. They'll appreciate it. So that being said, here are some of the resources that I used as far as books go. And these books I'll also include in the resource page that I will send you. But I'll tell you the book called Transforming School Climate and Learning Beyond Bullying and Compliance by Gordon and Preble. This is a book that I have used in the Path to Leadership program for several years now. And I've yet to find a book that is overall better when you're talking about transforming your school climate and learning, and primarily through the engagement of students. So if you're looking for one book, if I were you, I'd get a hold of all of them and look them over and decide what parts you're going to use. They're all really good books, but for me, that's my personal favorite of this group. So once again, I ask if you would kindly follow up with an exit ticket. Here is a QR code you can snap to get to that Padlet. I will also send you this link tomorrow. So I will follow up tomorrow with you, and I will follow up with a PDF of the slides, a link to the recording, the link to get sketchies, and the resource list. I will provide all of that for you tomorrow. And if there's anything else that you need, please go ahead and stick it in the chat, and I will watch for that. If there's something I missed that I said or did that you would appreciate having more information about, always happy to do that. As we are running to the very end of our time, as I've done every other time, I have 2 additional slides that just give you some updates, some things that have happened in the last couple of weeks. If you want to stick on and hear those things, you're welcome to. This does conclude the conversation about empowering students, though, and if that's all you came for, I will not be insulted if you leave, but I am going to spend here just a couple of minutes on 2 slides of things. So happy to do that, and appreciate your feedback and that you're giving me in the chat, and thanking me. I do appreciate that, and I do like to hear from you, so that I know if you do appreciate what was said and what might help make this stronger. So I appreciate that too. So, hot off the press, here are some updates. I even have an update to this update that I found out yesterday. The legislature sent HB 4048 to the Governor Whitmer's desk. That's the bill that's going to release some funds to the schools to deal with the pandemic. It contains significant funding sources for schools. There are strings attached. So far, we know the strings attached are that you must include mental health support for students. If you aren't already doing so, the money can be used for that, but the money has to be used for that as well. One of the requirements to get this money is you have to be engaging in in-person learning. There's actually a formula, and I meant to look that up, but I think it's like 20% of your students have to be learning in person or something along those lines, but there is some strings attached to that. And another string is they're going to require you to use that money. They're going to require you to have a plan, to submit a plan of how you'll use the money, similar to what we do for title funds. They're going to release it like a title fund type thing. They are still debating the work keys requirement. Right now, the current bill that seems to be favored and is getting some motion is that schools will not be required to give the work keys, but there will be funding available if students choose to take the work keys. So funding for work keys without the requirement, but that bill has not been passed yet. So that's just where it's kind of trending right now. And I also wanted to tell you that the MASSP just wrapped up a survey they did. So they surveyed all the schools in Michigan, secondary schools, or I should say the membership, people who are membership schools, and asked them what is their failure rate looking like from first semester. And 92% of the schools that replied said they have significantly higher than ever failure rates after semester 1. So 92% of the schools said that. So hardly any school said we don't have significant more failure than we have had in the past. And so what does that leave all of you with? Well, it leaves you with trying to figure out what you're going to do with these kids that are going to return next year without the content they need to move on, and in the high school level without the credits they need to move on. You know, in high schools, we have so many students, and we have a section of a class they have to have. They have to have English 9. We have so many 9th graders. We divide them up amongst. We decide how many blocks we have to have of that. But how about if you have to have your 4 blocks for the 100 students you have, but plus you have to have 2 or 3 additional blocks for all the kids who failed it this year? Where are you going to get those resources, right? You've got to figure that out. And summer learning is probably where you're going to have to get that figured out. And the funding that has been released is significantly for summer learning and to get those kids caught up. So I'll give you a couple updates for Michigan Virtual. They have 2 options for summer school. They have a credit recovery called their Essential. So what it is, if a kid took Algebra A or semester 1 and failed it, you sign them up with that class. They take a test. It assesses what they're missing. It assigns that work, and then they recover that credit. They don't have to take the whole class. They don't have to complete certain assignments. They've got to do whatever it takes for the essential standards that they did not assess well on. And they also offer full course. So they just have the full course, just traditional. They're working out really good deals with schools as far as the cost of their programs. And the biggest thing to know about that is that their programs are giving teachers the break they need. Okay, so right now that bill for summer school says that you can use money for summer learning if it's in-person learning, something along those lines. But keep in mind, you can have in-person learning still be online. It doesn't mean you have to have live teachers teaching live content. It means students have to come to school to use this money. So what some schools are doing is they're using Michigan Virtual to deliver the content, and they're using any teacher who's willing to come and just mentor students. So instead of the teacher spending the time delivering the instruction, Michigan Virtual's course delivers the instruction. That teacher supports the student to get through the instruction. different mindset. It may make your teachers want to engage more because they don't have to keep designing curriculum and keep delivering curriculum. They're just supporting students in what's already designed. They are continuing on with their personalized professional development, and it's been updated for the 21-22 school year. And they still have grants available for the Michigan Cares program, which is the student mental health programs. They still are offering grants that will give you that content free to your school. Very simple grant to fill out. And since we now know that that additional monies available are tied to you offering mental health support, this might be a time for you to look at that program to see how that might help you close that gap if you don't have it closed already. So those are the updates that I'm going to give you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have in the chat. Obviously, as you know, you can call me, contact me any way that you'd like, and I'll help you whenever I can. So have a great rest of the day, the rest of the week, and hang in there till spring break. It's coming soon, and the weather looks like it might give you a little taste of spring for that spring break. So that's hopeful. So we're all done, except for those of you who might want to chat. I'm going to hang on here for a minute and see who that might be. You are welcome, everyone. Appreciate that you showed up.